Okay, sorry for the delay for those who are waiting for the live feed. Pleasure to be at the Southeast Fire Center today with Minister Kat Conroy, who is just talking to officials at the moment, and MLA Brittany Anderson from Nelson Creston down the street. We got a very thorough briefing on the state of play here in the Southeast. The crack team, BC Wildfire Service, took us through one of the bombers, Pilot Neil and co-pilot Kim, showed us the tricks of the trade of a 60-year-old vessel that has been doing duty here in British Columbia and in other parts of North America for a long, long time. And when you talk to the professionals on the ground, working tirelessly to protect people, to protect property, to protect the forest and the animals that live there, it is really inspiring. And although this is, again, another very challenging season for the people on the ground and for communities across BC, I take great comfort in the knowledge that the professionals that are there season after season, and they're coming out in numbers now, season after season, are continuing to do their work, not taking any consideration of their own personal well-being. They're out there fighting fires. They're in the center here directing resources, and it's very exciting. Minister Conroy and MLA Anderson are now with me. But again, I think I speak for all British Columbians when I lift my hands in thanks to the people here in the Southeast and fire centres across British Columbia who have stepped up in what is a very, very early season here in the Kootenays and indeed right across the province. We've got many, many weeks ahead of us. You will know that a state of emergency has been declared. We received that advice. Minister Conroy, Minister Farnworth received that advice from the professionals that make these determinations based on changes in the weather patterns and the challenges that the winds that are forecast will have on the multitude of fires that are currently underway. Over 3,100 personnel at work right now trying to control the fires, put them out, and keep people safe. And again, great respect for all of the work that's happening there. And with that, I know there'll be questions. I'll pass it on to Lindsay, and she'll take questions from the media assembled.
Okay, let's try that again. As a reminder to media, you are limited to one question and one follow-up only. Please press star one. First question today is from Lisa Cordasco, Vancouver Sun.
Good morning, Premier. I'm sorry I missed the first part when we were connecting, but I'm just wondering where you are. And my actual question is, what message do you have to British Columbians who have been evacuated or who are on an evacuation notice, and those who are suffering, the thousands more suffering with the smoke in their communities?
Well, Lisa, Minister Conroy, MLA Anderson are with me at the Southeast Fire Center in Castlegar. We're touring the Kootenays, taking a look at the situation here on the ground. We've been briefed by the professional personnel here at the center that many come from across British Columbia to take up these positions during the fire season. We are in an early fire season. We've got weeks, perhaps months to go. Very challenging circumstances for these individuals. And for those who have been evacuated or under evacuation order right across the Kootenays in the interior and here in the south, our thoughts are with you. Our resources are behind you. Minister Farnworth yesterday declared a provincial state of emergency. We have all of the resources we need on the ground. Of course, if we had more, we would take them, that being firefighters from other jurisdictions. We have Quebec firefighters on the ground now, New Brunswick on the way. 100 Mexican firefighters who we depend on annually are on their way. They'll be here in a number of days. And we are also working with our other international partners, the United States, Australia, to make sure as this season continues that we have the resources that we need. But for those who are living through yet another horrific fire season, this is a graphic reminder of how climate change is with us, not just intermittently, but all the time. whether it's successive difficult fire seasons or floods or the heat dome, which is the first we've experienced, which I'm hopeful will be the last, but that's not the evidence that we're seeing on the horizon. We all have to hang together as British Columbians and follow the lead of emergency personnel, take guidance, take direction. If there's an evacuation order, it is not made lightly. And for those who believe that they should stay on their property and fight the good fight, better course of action is to take direction from those who are watching the fires, not from their fence line, but from above, and using technologies and personnel to protect people. We don't bring forward these orders lightly. We do it because it's in the best interest of British Columbians.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. Canfor has announced it's suspending its operations due to supply problems caused by wildfires. I'm wondering whether you can comment on the economic effect that these wildfires are having on the province and what might lie ahead.
Well, certainly the forest sector is going to be slowed down by the fires, no question about that. You will know that lumber prices have been at historic highs, and that's not a couple of percent above normal. It's massively above normal. So Canfor and other forest companies have done very well in the past number of months, and a break now to give relief on the land base, to provide the resources that we need, potentially equipment from those companies to put to the fire, is what happens almost annually when we have difficult seasons. So I'm not surprised that Canfor has decided to shut down. Will that have an impact in the short term? Of course it will. But again, these are quarterly businesses that table their profits, and you would have seen record high profits by major BC forest companies in the first quarter. I suspect we'll see that in the second quarter. We need to make sure that those benefits to those companies flow down to workers, to communities, and of course also to the province, so that we can provide the services that we need critically right now to put out fires. So these are cyclical events, and there goes a helicopter. These are cyclical events that the sector is always prepared for, and there is a relationship between industry with the ministry and communities to make sure we're all working together, and that's what I expect, and that's what's been happening.
Next question is from Richard Zussman, Global News.
Premier, tourism operators in the Okanagan were no doubt counting on this summer to bounce back from, wineries to other destinations. The fires will have an impact on that. Also, tourism operators in Metro Vancouver and the Capital Region are counting on this summer. Are you concerned that the declaration of a state of emergency will keep visitors out of areas that are even not impacted by the fire because of this idea that BC is now under a state of emergency?
Well, we were under a state of an emergency for a year and a couple of months. And we still had people coming. You'll recall that I was urging people to not come, but they came anyway. I get your question, and I understand that obviously smoke in the Okanagan is going to have a dampening effect on tourism. I do know that Vancouver Island, I was watching, I think it might have even been your outlet last night, talking about people who have come to the island because they've chosen to come to Victoria and points north rather than go to their traditional destinations because of the fires. But I think people understand that this is an extraordinary time. We've come through a global pandemic. We're in the grip of climate change that we can see and feel and smell every day. And I think most people will make rational decisions for themselves and for those businesses that are affected. We have been there for over a year and a half to make sure that we're stabilizing them, making sure that they have the capital that they need to keep operating, and we'll keep doing that. We have made sacrifices as British Columbians, businesses, communities, individuals for the past year and a half, and we have more sacrifices to make as we come through what is another potentially historic fire season.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
Sure. Thanks.
It will keep the borders between the U.S. and Canada, the land borders, closed until August 21st. Do you see this potentially as an advantage to British Columbia, keeping Canadians home rather than going to the other side? Or are you concerned that this lacks fairness, that our borders are opening here to Americans on August 9th, but not reciprocated until at least August 21st?
Well, you and I have talked about this for some time now. The federal government is responsible for our borders. We have had input, certainly at the front end, urging closures, and we've had input throughout this time, engaging as provincial leaders with the federal government on how best to restart our integration with the rest of the world. The federal government made a decision to open to U.S. citizens on the 9th. Doubly vaccinated citizens on the 9th of August, and I can't predict or control what the U.S. does. I will say that I do know that Canadians have, there's more vaccinations in Canada than there is in the United States, and based on my experience talking to people, looking at opinion research, I rather doubt that people will be lining up in large numbers to travel south until they feel confident that the pandemic is well and truly behind us. This is a transition period, and we've been talking about this. It's not about flicking a switch, it's about a dialing up of activity. More and more people are becoming comfortable in larger groups. I've been engaging and traveling around British Columbia, meeting with larger groups of people, but there's still an apprehension. People are anxious. Mask wearing continues, and I endorse that in circumstances where you're unfamiliar with your surroundings or you're inside. So there's going to be a transition from where we were to where we all want to get to. And if there is not an overlap on border restrictions between Canada and the United States, there's really little I can do about that other than encourage people, as I have been for months, to stay home, go local, go to those attractions and those destinations that are often crowded with American tourists. Take advantage of that and see your backyard. Have a holiday at home, have a holiday in your region, and do what you can to support those businesses that are always there to support us, whether it's helping with the sports organizations, with the arts, industry, particularly in British Columbia, has always focused on building stronger communities. Now it's time for the community to give back to those companies by going to those shops, going to those industries, going to those attractions and spending some money.
Next question is from Rob Buffum, CTV-VI.
Oh, hi, Premier. I just have one question, and it's a follow-up to the previous one. I know it's not your decision, it's the federal government's, but given that we have a higher vaccination rate up here than they do south of us, we're hearing about escalating case numbers there. Are you worried that there'll be folks hopping on the Clipper to come up to Victoria, or Americans coming up to BC to visit at this point, or as of August 9th, I should say?
Well, certainly the Canada Border Service Agency is responsible for ensuring that the restrictions that the federal government puts in place are managed. We've laid out from the BC perspective what we expect from the federal government. We're also standing at the ready, resources permitting, to assist in terms of making sure that we can have seamless integration of people coming into the province. We have not just air entry points and land entry points, but as you quite rightly say, on Vancouver Island, we have the Clipper, we have the Coho, we have a whole host of other ways for Americans to come into British Columbia up and down the coast. So we want to be there with the federal government to manage that, to protect people. And if you haven't had 2 doses, if I heard the Prime Minister correctly, and I'm confident that I did, you're not allowed in the country. And we need to make sure that we're enforcing that, and the province stands ready to help the federal government in that regard.
Follow-up, Rob?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. Next question is from Lisa Houston, News 1130.
Hi there, Premier. Regarding the, Richard was sort of touching on this, but the tourism operators, the hotels, the people who take people on tours, and the wine producers in the fire regions right now that we're counting on, this summer to pull them out of the hole, and now they're having cancellations. Will there be more financial support for the people who are, the pain of the pandemic is enduring now because of the pain of the fire season?
Yeah. Yeah, no, we are going to continue being there. We put in place this infrastructure. We have, I would suggest, and maybe people will disagree with me, but the relationship between the business community, labor, and government has never been as strong as it is right now, because we all had to collaborate to get through the pandemic. And we were able as a government to be nimble, to make changes in policy and programs to help people, sometimes over the course of a weekend. Sometimes it took longer than that. But we're going to continue doing that until we're well and truly past this and back to what we can characterize as normal. But absolutely, I know that on the agriculture side, they were hoping for bumper crops with decent weather. Now we have berry crops, cherries, and other soft fruits that have been profoundly impacted by the heat. And of course, they'll also be impacted by the fires as we come through those areas of the province that depend on agriculture. So there's no shortage of challenges on the economy. There's no shortage of challenges in people's individual lives. But we've all been able to get through this because we've had one common view, and that is British Columbians are stronger hanging together. And that means ensuring that government has resources for industry, for businesses, so they can get through yet another challenging period of time.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, and talking about border reopening and more Americans will be coming up here, will there be more support for, the tourism operators are hurting so hard because they don't have enough staff. That's in so many different areas. And because we rely on people coming from other countries to work here and take jobs that we don't have, will there be more assistance for getting people from Australia, from other countries that come here to work during, seasons, to get them here so that these businesses can be running full speed versus having to turn away clients because they don't have the staff to take care of them?
Well, on the agriculture side, many operators depend on temporary foreign workers from south of us, and we have been working with industry, with the agriculture sector. We've been vaccinating incoming workers so that we can ensure that as they come into British Columbia, that they are safe and they're keeping the people they work with safe. So we put in place programs and protocols to help with the labor shortages we have in some sectors, but we are now past the employment rate we had in February of 2020. We have more people working today than we did then, and I hear from every sector we have a shortage of labor. I've just heard from fire personnel here that we need to ensure that we're training the next generation of firefighters, whether they're going to be using aircraft, whether they're going to be on the ground, whether they're going to be at control centers like this. We need to be constantly renewing the skill set of younger British Columbians in every walk of life. These are profound challenges, but that's what governments are supposed to do. Assess the needs in a community and then deliver the programs and the services that people need. We're focused on that. We're going to keep doing that.
We're just going to take a pause for a second and let a truck go through.
Fire return.
Oh, thank you. Pardon, right? Coming in, yeah.
Okay.
No, fine.
Next
Good.
question is from Michelle Gasab, CBC.
Fuel for the helicopter.
Fuel? Okay.
Hi there. On the flip side of that tourism question, lots of people have recreational travel booked for areas that are either threatened by fires or housing evacuees, and people are wondering whether they should be canceling that travel, especially if areas are facing a shortage of hotel rooms for evacuees. So what is your message for people trying to decide whether or not they should be canceling travel at this point?
Well, we said, that's a very good question, and thank you for that. We said as we moved from step 1 to step 2 that we started seeing more travel inside of British Columbia, people from the island coming to the Kootenays, people from the interior going north, and that general movement of people within the province. And Dr. Henry was pretty clear, as was I, that if you're going to be leaving your community to go somewhere else, check up what's going on there. We did not, of course, envision at that moment that it would be to check about evacuations, to check about the fire situation, but that's prudent behavior by anyone at this point in time. We do have significant fires throughout the southeast and, well, the southeast moving north to Kamloops and then into the interior. So if you're going to be traveling to those areas, check with the local providers, check with whoever you've booked accommodation with, and see what advice they're giving you. In the end, people will make their choices. That's entirely up to them. There will be closures in the backcountry. There are now, and there will be more coming as fires continue to ignite. We have a bad stretch of weather ahead of us. We have winds picking up. These are all bad news for the fire service and the personnel on the ground, and of course it's going to have a profound impact on the economy as well. But for those people who have reservations, check with your accommodations, see what the people on the ground are telling you, and then make your decisions. We will, of course, be reviewing all of this at the end of the summer. We have been, again, in a state of emergency for a year and a quarter, almost a year and a half. We're back into one. These crises have been coming one after the other over the past number of years, and our responsibility, Katrina, Brittany, and I, and the entire government, whether elected or unelected, is to make sure we're responding to the needs in communities. And we are going to be hearing from the tourism industry, who have been very patient, and we've been working collaboratively to get to this opening on July 1st. And yet now here we are 20 days later, with grim prospects in some parts of the province, and we're going to continue those dialogues. And as I said to an earlier question, the relationships between industry, community, workers, and government has never been as tight as it is now. We need to take advantage of those relationships that have been built to make sure we put in place a foundation to help those that are struggling right now and make sure that we get better years ahead. That's pretty much all you can do when you've had 3 of the worst fire seasons in 5 years, and that's what we've been facing. That's what British Columbians have been grappling with. Again, people making sacrifices every day. Our job is to make sure that we're helping them.
Michelle, do you have a follow-up?
We heard yesterday that part of the reason the emergency was brought in was so that you could potentially create more areas for evacuees to stay. Do you know if anything has been done on that so far?
Well, the numbers are not yet anywhere near, in terms of evacuations, anywhere near where we were in 2017 and 2018. However, the weather forecasts are grim. Minister Farnworth was given a briefing by his personnel as well as Minister Conroy's at BC Wildfire Service, and they made the determination based on advice that the state of emergency was required, largely for the reasons you suggested. We need to make sure that we can mobilize resources prior to an evacuation order being issued in a region, and that means working with the hospitality sector, working with post-secondary institutions, Thompson Rivers University, for example, and other institutions in the interior that have housing available. We want to be able to direct people to those locations. That's what we've done in the past, and that's what we anticipate we'll do as the season progresses.
Amy Smart, Canadian Press.
Hi, Premier. You mentioned you're in talks with the United States and Australia about potentially spending more resources. I understand COVID may be a challenge in getting resources right now, as well as the wildfire situations in the United States. What are you hearing from them? Does it sound like they're going to send people, or are you running into barriers?
Well, we certainly, we know in Australia they're in lockdown at the moment. We have had commitments from them for equipment and management personnel. That's very helpful. And we're just going to have to wait and see. Similarly, the challenges here in British Columbia are being felt in Washington, Oregon, and California. So we haven't had, we have a coastal challenge right now. So the resources that we would have relied on in the past are fully occupied in their home jurisdictions when it comes to the U.S. On the east side of the United States, where we oftentimes pull personnel, they're looking up to Ontario and all of the fire that we see from Northern Ontario right through to British Columbia. So we are not alone in this challenge. We're sharing it, regrettably, with our neighbors. And the U.S. is a particular challenge because of and you've been seeing on media outlets and observing the fires they've seen in California, successive fire seasons there. Oregon right now is a particularly difficult spot. So we're not expecting U.S. resources anytime soon, but our friends in Australia and New Zealand are focused on COVID. And so we're trying to find ways. Obviously, we have a pretty good result here. Over 80% of British Columbians over 12 have been vaccinated at least once, and some 55% have 2 doses. So people look at British Columbia's track record on COVID, where we are right now, and that makes it an easier sell for us, quite frankly, to encourage people to come. But there are a multitude of challenges that did not exist in traditional years as a result of COVID-19.
Amy, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just regarding the state of emergency, last week you were saying, it wouldn't affect the resources we have. We don't, it won't make a difference. We're putting everything towards it. I'm wondering, for people who are getting a mixed message about whether a state of emergency makes a difference, what do you say to them who are a bit confused about the about face?
Well, it wasn't an about face. What we said was, when we got advice from the professionals that do this 12 months a year, year after year, we would take action. Minister Farnworth got that advice yesterday, and the state of emergency was put in place. Where it's of most value to us, and where was the deciding factor for the minister, was that the weather patterns that we're seeing are not going to break up. The wind, as you can maybe hear, here in the Kootenays is brisk. That means that the fires are going to move. We can't predict them the way we could if the winds were not as aggressive. And we want to be able to work before a evacuation order is issued. That, under the emergency powers, allows us to do so. So we can go into an area where there is not currently an evacuation order, work with the community, work with the hospitality sector, find whether it's an arena, whether it's, as I say, a residence at a post-secondary institution, using school gymnasiums. Those are all things that we can do, but we have not been at that place right now because the evacuations are relatively low. And of course, if you're on an evacuation order, that's cold comfort. But we have not come anywhere near the numbers we saw at this point in the season in 2017 and 2018. But we anticipate the situation remaining dire, and therefore we want to anticipate where there may be evacuations, and Minister Farnworth will now have the tools to do that.
We have time for one more question today. Colton Davies, Radio NL.
Hi, Premier. Thank you for doing this. Just touching more on wildfire evacuees, many in this area are traveling at least 1 to 2 hours to evacuation centers, and some are going even further, like Kamloops to Chilliwack, and some are even going from the Southern Caribou to Prince George. You kind of touched on this a little bit there ago, but I'm just curious what kind of work that the provincial government is doing to try and open group lodging for fire evacuees, with things like cots potentially in public buildings in Kamloops, for example. I've talked with local governments here who have said all month that talks are ongoing, and I'm just curious how the province has been involved in these talks, if you have any specifics.
Well, we have been engaged with local government. We've been engaged with post-secondary institutions. And of course, I think back to my first year as Premier in 2017, visiting Kamloops and going to Thompson Rivers and seeing the hundreds of people housed there, going to the rec center in Prince George, seeing hundreds of people on cots there. We are moving to that stage. Minister Farnworth has the resources to do all of that. And back to a previous question, Colton, if I could, it's not a question about us being able to deploy personnel or dollars. It's about being able to say to people, we need you to move out so we can move people in. And those decisions are again, best made not by politicians, but by the personnel that that work on this year after year. We had that advice this week. Minister Farnworth acted, and now we're going to accelerate those discussions with municipal leaders and others who have access to spaces that we can use for evacuees.
Colton, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, and thanks for that answer, Premier. And just related, I guess, but 16 days ago, I think it was, the Thompson-Nicola Regional District asked the BC government, or voted that they would ask the BC government to ban backcountry use in the TNRD. So that would be separate from area bans around active wildfires, but what they're calling for is potentially a ban on things like camping on Crown land or motorized vehicles on Crown land. And it was pretty specific. They want this ban for this season only when the fire risk is high or extreme, or in areas when the fire risk is high or extreme. So now that there's a provincial state of emergency, yesterday the board chair of the TNRD said he hoped that might push that discussion further. Do you see potentially a wide-ranging recreational Crown land area ban with the fire risk?
Those, again, are decisions that are made by Emergency Management BC and the BC Wildfire Service based on resources. Blanket bans require enforcement. Enforcement requires resources. We want to focus first and foremost on those areas most at risk. We greatly appreciate the advice and counsel of regional districts and municipal leaders, but again, they would understand, as they do in their difficult circumstances, they turn to staff, they turn to professionals who are here day in and day out, not just election after election, and ask them what's the best way forward. I think that's what citizens citizens expect. We have skilled personnel at municipal regional tables as well as throughout the BC Public Service and the federal government. And working with those skilled professionals is our job to make sure we're channeling it in the most effective way and not squandering resources because it may well sound like a good thing to do. And I don't want to diminish the importance of keeping people out of the backcountry when the fuel is tinder dry and the winds are going to be brisk. But again, those decisions will come through the professionals to Minister Farnworth, to Minister Conroy. They'll make those decisions in concert with regional governments. But at this point in time, I'm going to leave it at that. We are doing our best to make sure we're protecting people, property, protecting our forests and the wildlife that depend on it. There's a whole range of challenges. We could spend the day talking about just the issues affecting the southeast, much less the Caribou, the Okanagan, into the boundary country. The island is heating up. We have one reprieve in the north, which allows us to, because of the weather changing there, we can reallocate resources from the northwest, for example, to assist elsewhere. Normally in a fire season, we're not hopping in every corner of the province. This is the situation right now. We're almost hopping in every corner, and with the weather predictions as they are, we have some challenges ahead. So to British Columbians, please, please, please stay out of the backcountry unless you've got a reason to be there. Abide by the orders that are in place locally, regionally, and provincially.
That's all the time we have this morning. Thank you for joining us.